Hi! I'm so excited for this video. My name's Michelle. I read books. I don't know how to do an intro. What do I normally say? It's been a minute. I've been in another world. I've been really working hard on other projects. I'm late to the game. This video was supposed to come out maybe 2 weeks ago. We're not going to talk about it. It's going to come out now, and you should be so excited. This book is actually going to be the first in a series of 4 videos in which I'm going to be reading Booktubers' favorites from 2022. This was one of my favorite videos that I made last year. I made a video where I read Booktuber favorites, and I wound up only doing 2 videos. This time I decided to do it slightly different. I tried to approach it in a little bit more of like a organized way, and I also tried to split it. So I'm doing 4 videos because some of my most favorite books from 2022 came from that video in which I read Booktubers favorites. So I really wanted to delve into it, and because I read in a lot of different genres, I wanted to break it down by genre. So this first video is going to be favorite romances from last year. So these are Booktubers' favorite romances from 2022, but I have 3 more videos coming. I'm going to do one where I read just like general contemporary fiction, lit fic, that sort of stuff. I have another one where I'm reading fantasy series, and then I have another one where I'm reading mystery, horror, thriller, darker books. So romance is the first in the lineup of 4. They should be coming out over the next month or 2. They probably won't be coming out every week. I'm thinking every other. It honestly depends on how fast I can read these books because I am trying to read 5 books for each one of these videos. So I didn't want to do them every single week because then I have to read 20 books in a month, and I just know myself, and I know that's probably not going to happen. So it'll probably be every other week that these ones will be coming out, and this will be the first in that series. So the way I approached it was I went through and watched a bunch of the Booktubers I typically watch. All of the videos where they talked about their favorite books of the year. So I'm going to just list you through the Booktubers I watched for this, and then we'll get into the specific books I'm reading for this video. So I had Chandler Ainsley, Meg with books. I always want to add that in there. Carrie Can Read, Haley Pham, Noelle Gallagher, Rachel from The Raven-Haired Reader, Carly from UnCarly, Lena Norms, Katie Colson, Steph Bohr, Kayla from Books and Lala, Allison Pages, Jack Edwards, and Christine from Poland Bananas. So those were the Booktubers I pulled from. I think I have at least one rec from all of them once we get through all 4 videos, but honestly I don't know. So those are the Booktubers I pulled from. And then when I was making my list for these 4 specific categories, I went through and I pulled anything that showed up in more than one of those Booktubers favorite videos automatically made it on the list. So if it showed up in 2 or more of the Booktubers favorites, it was on my list. And also if it was their #1 favorite read from the year. A lot of them don't actually rank their reads, but some of them did, and for anyone who said this is my absolute favorite book of the year, I wanted to make sure that was included in my video. So for the romance books, this is what we started with. I'm going to tell you what we started with. The end, you're going to see it. 1, I wound up with 6 books, not 5. And I also wound up switching out a couple just because I'm not going to force myself to read books that I know I'm not going to like. And there was one book on here that I was like, this is not going to be it for me. And there's another book on here that I wound up pushing to another video. So as we go through, you'll kind of see that. But the initial 5 books I was going to read was Heartless by Elsie Silver, which was in Chandler Ainsley's and the Raven-Haired Reader's favorites. Then I was going to read Better Than the Movies by Lana Painter, which was Haley Pham's favorite book of 2022. Then I was going to read The Roughest Draft, which was in Haley Pham's favorites. But I also remember Chandler Ainsley recommends this book all the time. I believe it was in her favorites of the year in 2021. So I considered that one because I've just seen Chandler recommend it so many times. And then I had Alone with You in the Ether by Olivie Blake, which is from Raven-Haired Reader. I've also seen it all over TikTok. I was really eager to read that one. And then Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan from Nicole Gallagher's favorites.
Her name is definitely not Nicole. It is Noelle.
And then this one got added on at the last minute, but I'll tell you about it now. And that is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. It was on Chandler Ainsley's favorite, but it hadn't made my list, except then Poland Bananas. Her video actually came out kind of later. I had already made the list and started reading, and it was also on that list. And so I decided to add it. And I'm pretty glad I did. I was going to do this as a cute little get ready with me type of video. But then my afternoon meeting, which is the only thing that I needed to be ready for, got canceled. So all of my work can be done in my sweatshirt and makeup free situation. So I will not be getting ready. So instead of getting
this is Get Ready With Me. I'm just going to chat with you. I wanted to kind of update you where I was. I've finished Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan, and I'm about halfway through the Roughest draft, which are the first 2 books that I'm reading. I wanted to give like a quick little pause, a little intermission here to talk about the strike that's going on with HarperCollins right now. So right now, HarperCollins, which is the only publisher that is unionized, is striking. So they've been striking since before Christmas, and they are just striking for like a pretty nominal pay increase to match the cost of living in New York, because most of their employees live in New York, where there is like an incredibly high cost of living, and the entry level salaries like really do not match that, and so they are striking for a salary increase. So Thank You for Listening is a HarperCollins title. I will still be talking about it here in this video. At this point, I like really had anticipated HarperCollins to have like dealt with this, and they have finally, after like 60 days of strike, they have agreed to have negotiations with the union. So hopefully their strike will be resolved soon, and all of the editors and all the people working at HarperCollins will have contracts renegotiated to make their salaries more equitable. If you want to know more about the strike in the union and all of the stuff that's going on, you can click the link below. So I wanted to give my thoughts first on Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan. This book surprised me with how much I enjoyed it. Initially, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. It felt a little silly. It's like, it deals with some heavier topics, but I feel like overall it is like fairly lighthearted, and it also kind of like pokes fun at the romance genre in this very like insider way, not in a like a cruel way, but in a very like teasing sort of like sibling-y type of way. Like there's definitely like a silliness and a lightheartedness and like a little bit of a ridiculousness to some of the like plot moments that happen. You have to suspend some disbelief, which, as you know, if you've been around here, is not something I ever have a problem with. Like, love a little suspension of disbelief when it comes to a romance novel, and I like really enjoyed it. Like, I was shocked at how much I enjoyed it. And I also did decide to do the audiobook version. I'm not a big audiobook listener, but Julia Whelan is an audiobook narrator. She narrates her own audiobook in this case, and she's a really good audiobook narrator. I know she's people's like favorite. She does all the Emily Henry books. I haven't listened to any of the Emily Henry books because, like I said, I'm not a huge audiobook listener, but I think she does Taylor Jenkins Reid's audiobooks too. So she's like a big deal lady. And I really enjoyed having her tell me the story. Loved it. Like, really enjoyed the story. I guess I should tell you what it's about. So Thank You for Listening is the story of an audiobook narrator. Do you remember their names already? No, I've already forgotten their names, but we have this audiobook narrator who was an actress. She like went to Juilliard to become an actress, but she had an accident which has caused her to lose one of her eyes, and now she has an eye patch, and she stopped acting because obviously that limits the roles you can get. And she became an audiobook narrator, and she started out narrating romance books, as like a lot of people do, but kind of moved away from romance books and is now doing like the bigger general fiction books. And it starts with her having this like meet cute with this guy in Las Vegas. She's in Las Vegas with her best friend, who is a famous actress, and her best friend winds up flying out for what's just supposed to be a meeting, like a quick meeting in LA. She's just supposed to fly from LA and fly back, but it snows in Las Vegas, and so the airport obviously closes because Las Vegas, the airport is not prepared for snow. And so she winds up having this evening with this like Irish gentleman, and she pretends she's Southern the whole time and uses like a fake name, and they have just this kind of like moment. The night ends and they both go back to their regular lives, and she's kind of like really wistful about this moment. She like really felt this connection to this guy. Alas, the night is over. And then she gets back and she winds up getting roped into this romance project. She, like I said, she doesn't narrate romance books anymore, but she gets roped into this project. It's gonna be like a serialized romance novel for one of her favorite authors that she narrated for when she first started, who has passed away, and like her dying wish is to have this audiobook narrator narrate half of the audiobook. It's an audiobook that's going to be told from dual perspectives, so there's going to be a male narrator and a female narrator, and she decides to do it, one, because she really likes this author who's passed away, but also because her grandmother has dementia and is needing to be moved into a like more substantive care facility, and that's expensive, and she's decided to kind of cover the cost because her dad wants to move. You know, there's lots of family drama. Then she winds up kind of they going back and forth, a lot of texting and emailing with the audiobook narrator who's doing the male voices, and they wind up very quickly developing like a very witty banter back and forth, and like definitely there's some chemistry. And so we've got kind of like two potential love interests, this like guy from this one night she had in Vegas, and then this like male audiobook narrator who's like got this like really like sultry voice and uses a pseudonym so nobody knows who he is. And so it is kind of about her grappling with both of those things, as well as dealing with her grandmother and kind of coming to terms with that, and also trying to come to terms with her disfigurement that happened when she had that injury that she lost her eye in. And I thought it was just so good. It is my favorite kind of romance novel. This reminded me a lot of an Emily Henry novel. And if you know literally anything about me, it's that I'm obsessed with Emily Henry. But it reminded me of an Emily Henry novel because I think Julia Whelan does such a beautiful job of like interweaving like family drama and those sorts of dynamics in with this like romance story. And we get a lot of background from her, and I just feel like we have like a really full sense. There's like a sense of humor and a sense of joy, but there's also a sense of like of depth with all of the characters we get to meet. And we get like some fun side characters. I don't know, it was just like a really enjoyable experience, and it kind of surprised me because I think in the first couple chapters I was a little on the fence because it felt a little silly, but I think the silliness is paired really beautifully with some more serious conversations, and I like absolutely loved it. Then I started in on the Roughest Draft, which is by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegemund-Broka, and they're actually husband and wife. And it's really interesting because it is so it's a co-written novel, as I just said. But the novel itself is about a co-writing pair, a co-writing duo. They're not a married duo. I'm liking this book a little less than Thank You for Listening, which is surprising to me. I would have thought it was the opposite. This one is like, the premise is really similar to Beach Read. It's compared a lot to Beach Read. But I think for me, the difference between this one and Beach Read is this one we get a little bit less. One, it's dual perspective. And dual perspective books often, I don't know if there's any 5-star romances for me that are dual perspective. It's just not my personal preference. I prefer getting the woman's perspective and like kind of learning about their chemistry from her perspective. 100% personal preference. But also, we don't get a ton of background about these characters. We're getting what happened to them like 3 years earlier, and maybe a little bit about what they met, but we're not getting a lot about like their family. What were they like growing up? Like, why did they decide to become writers? And maybe we'll get more of that as the novel goes on, but I've been finding that I really appreciate having like pretty deep backstories for my romance characters. And this was not this year, but this was, I think last year, one of Chandler Ainsley's favorite books of the year. I know it's a book she really enjoys. She recommends it like to people who like Beach Read. And I often find that I have a different taste in romances, especially like serious romances than Chandler. And I think that's part of it. I like to have like a lot of like character building, and I like to have a lot of stuff happening outside of the romance. I like to have kind of like a very like complex, and like they're dealing with like their personal struggles as well as dealing with their romance struggles, and they can kind of be separate, like they don't need to be solved by the same thing. And this for me is just falling a little flat so far. So that's where we're at. I just got Alone with You in the Ether in, so I'm reading Alone with You in the Ether as well. I'll probably be starting that tonight as soon as I finish the Roughest Draft, which I think I have like an hour and a half according to my Kindle left on it. I don't think I've updated you in like a long time. I am also currently drafting right now. I'm working on my second book. It is technically due at the end of the month, but I'm gonna have to ask for an extension, which I am not excited for, but that's neither here nor there. So I've been working on that, and so I like have been trying to spend less time on like my phone and, you know, recording things. But I have been reading. I wanted to kind of give you the little updatey date, because I've actually finished 2 books since I last spoke with you. First, I'm going to talk about the Roughest Draft. The premise is very similar to Beach Read, but I don't think the stylings are very similar to Beach Read at all. And honestly, setting anything up to Beach Read is going to be like a challenge for me, because Beach Read is my favorite romance book. It's one of my top favorite books of all time. And so I think that set it up for not success. And I think this book is really good. Before I kind of go into some of the things I didn't like as much about it, I want to say this book is really good. So like I said, Chandler loved it, Haley loved it. I feel like I've heard other people talk about it too. I really enjoyed it. The premise of the Roughest draft, I don't know if I've gone over this, is it's this couple. I thought they were husband and wife, but the author of the actual book are husband and wife, but the people in the book are not husband and wife. They're just like writing partners. They like met when they were in grad school. They wrote 2 novels together. Their second novel was like this big bestseller, but at the very end of their like writing process, they had a falling out. We don't know exactly what happened, but we know something happened. You know the deal. You've read a book with 2 timelines in a romance before. And now they're back. They both have reasons for wanting to be back and writing this new draft, and they've decided to take 2 months, go to Florida, and stay at this like house, this beach house in Florida, and write their book. We pick up and they like hate each other. And so they hated each other, but one time they were friends, and we like learn about everything that's happened. Obviously a romance ensues. That was because I have a marketing meeting in 30 minutes and I didn't want to forget. So now you know as well. But and I thought it was really good. I thought the romance was really interesting. It's very well written, very enjoyable. The things that I didn't love, I again and again am finding that just like 2 perspective romance novels are just not my favorite. I know they are. Some people love them. Some people prefer them over single perspective. I prefer a single perspective. I prefer a little bit of the mystery of like not knowing what the guy is thinking in a romance novel. I really enjoy that. And so I didn't love that aspect here. And then I also felt like we didn't get a ton of backstory. And I like a pretty rich backstory for my characters. Another thing that I really was like discovering as I was reading this book is I want to know a lot about them. And I feel like we don't know anything about them until like we don't learn anything about their past before when they met. Like we don't learn about anything that happened to them before they knew each other. And one of my favorite parts of the Emily Henry books, I actually think this is a more equitable comparison to The People We Meet on Vacation. Like I think it is incredibly similar to The People We Meet on Vacation, kind of format wise, even though like premise wise it might sound like it's like a beach read book, but it, like structurally it's a People We Meet on Vacation book. We like learn a lot about their childhood and why their childhood shaped them into the people they are today. And I really enjoy that. And I don't feel like we really got that with this book. We got a lot of like how their relationship initially like evolved over the years and how it's influenced how they interact now, but not about like before that. So that's kind of like my 2 big complaints. And it just like, it was a great romance, but it wasn't like a favorite romance for me. And then I also finished Heartless by Elsie Silver. This I think is the only indie book on this list as it currently stands. We'll see where this list has evolved. We'll talk about that too. But I also read Heartless by Elsie Silver, which like it was both on Chandler Ainsley's and Raven-Haired Readers favorites list of the year. As I was editing, I realized I never actually told you what this book is about. So Heartless by Elsie Silver is a like small town romance. It is part of an interconnected series. I actually believe this is the 2nd book in the series, but this is the one that was on both their lists, and they're very much standalones. I like didn't feel like I had any trouble reading this without reading the first one. Essentially, it takes place on this horse ranch in I think Montana, but I could be just adding Montana for color. And it is about this single father. His son is like 6 years old, I think, and he needs a nanny for the summer because he like works full-time on this ranch and he like needs someone to watch his kid. But the problem is everyone in town is just like in love with this guy because he's like super like hot stuff, and he doesn't want a nanny that's just gonna be like obsessed with him. He's also just got like weirdly strict guidelines because he has some like abandonment issues because his wife, the mother of his child, just like peaced out. And then we meet our heroine, whose name I cannot remember, but she shows up and she's the best friend of, I think, the heroine from the first novel, which I did not read, and she's gonna come and be the nanny for this family. And so it's like a nanny single dad romance. Romance ensues from there. I enjoyed it. It was like a fun time. It is very like a classic small town indie romance. To me, it didn't totally stand out. It reminded me a lot of, I read Elizabeth Morgan's book. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but I'll flash the cover up here, at the end of last year, and it like felt very similar. It's like a single dad nanny romance. I've read several of them in KU. But it's a well done one. Like, it's well done. The family is interesting and well developed. It takes place on a ranch, so there's like horses. If you're like a horse girl, a fun time for you. The kid is like cute and didn't do anything crazy. Sometimes the kids really pull me out of it. Not in this book, but in other books that I've read where there's children, I'm like, that's not how children behave. I thought the relationship was good. It was much spicier than I was anticipating. It is like a pretty spicy book overall, but a good time. I did a little switcheroo. I did a little switcheroo-ski. So initially I had Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter on this list because it was Haley Pham's favorite book of the year. And I started this book, I read like a chapter of it, and I think it's really good, but I like could tell that it wasn't going to be a book I enjoyed. It's a YA romance. And contemporary YA is just like not a genre I read anymore. I know I talk about how I like will read anything, but contemporary YA is something that I used to really love. Loved it when I was like the YA age. I will occasionally read one because if you tell me a book is good enough, I will read it, but it's just like wasn't me at the moment. So I decided to switch it out for one of Stephanie Bohr's favorites, which is Before We Were Strangers. And I did read the entirety of this book too. I read this book really quickly. This book, I was like, I don't know, it like seems like a normal length book, but I just went through it very quickly. And this is probably my least favorite of the books that I've read so far for this video. It felt very independently published. It is supposedly by Atria, but I'm wondering, I'm not sure, I didn't look into it, but I'm wondering if it was indie published and then because it got so much attention, it got picked up by a traditional publisher, because it felt very indie published. Okay, I just wanted to come in here with a quick explanation because I feel like I didn't explain this well. So for me, there's like a distinct difference between an indie romance and a traditional romance. Like I can read it and like probably tell you which one it was, at least initially, although that line is getting blurred because some of the more popular indie romances are getting picked up by traditional publishers, and I really enjoy both of them, but there is like definitely a different vibe. And what I meant by this one felt very like indie published is I didn't feel like it had like a strong central plot arc that pulled every single scene forward, which is I think something that is like traditional publishing really requires of their books, is they require this like very consistent, coherent plot arc that pulls everything forward and everything like relates back to that plot arc. I think in indie romances they can get away with something that's a little bit more wandering, including scenes just because they're like a good time, and also just like go on a wander through things. And this just felt like a little bit more wandering and a little less like rigidly structured than a traditional romance. Let me explain the premise of this book. The premise of this book is that this man sees his first love on a subway as the doors are closing. Like, he's like, Grace! And the doors close in the subway, buzzes off. And he has recently gotten out of a marriage. He hasn't seen this woman for like 15 years. They met in college and had like, they were like deeply, deeply in love. And then he left, and like things left kind of on like a weird note where like he came back and she wasn't there, and she was supposed to be there, and blah, blah, blah. And they've never really been able to get back in touch. Things were strange. And then we're getting it from his perspective and her perspective. We don't get her perspective till later. So we start with his perspective on like kind of where he's at now. He sees her, it creates this big evidence. He's looking for her everywhere. He puts a like missing connections ad in Craigslist. And then we go back in time and we see their relationship in college, and we kind of see the entirety of their relationship. They started as friends, they became something more, and then we see how things end up. And then and we see this from both his and her perspective. And then we go to the future where she finds the missing connections post on Craigslist, and they're like reconnecting. And obviously there's like secrets and drama and like, I don't know. This was like a very fast read and a very, very like enjoyable read in terms of like, you know, that kept the pages turning. I've been really thinking about, I've been watching a lot of author interviews lately. It like feels like a productive waste of time. Is it? Arguable. But I was listening to one by Donna Tartt, and she was talking about how when she's writing, she's trying to balance density and speed. And I found that like really compelling because I think that's essentially what all books are doing. And this book focused solely on speed and like lost complete track of density. Like, I don't think we get a deep exploration of these characters, about their interactions, about why they are the way they are. Like, I didn't feel like we had a ton of depth, despite the fact that it was like page turning, was gripping. The story like kept me moving. I think specifically on a prose level, because I do think we get some like good character development as far as like their backstories and like where they came from and why they act the way they do. But like on a prose level, we were just like going through the story. Like, she did not have time for fancy prose in the slightest. And I wouldn't say I'm someone who like really needs fancy prose. Like, I love a good, like I said, indie romance, which is what this read like. But this just like was like very devoid of a lot of like texture and depth in the like language and the way it was written, and I kind of missed out on that a little bit. But yeah, like a very compelling story. If you like love like a Colleen Hoover, or I'm trying to think of other books that are like really zippy and fast, like maybe an Ali Hazelwood even, but like something a little bit more angsty, because Ali Hazelwood is just like kind of silly in the best ways, then I would recommend this book. Here's where we're at. So I have Alone with You in the Ether, which I'm like currently reading. It's actually one of those two books. We have Babel and Alone with You in the Ether. So I'm currently reading that. So far, that has been strange. I was like set up to know that it was like a strange book, but like the formatting, the language, what is happening is putting me a little off kilter, which is why I like haven't really dug into it. And I like tried downloading the audiobook and like doing a little bit with the audiobook, but like I don't think that's it. I don't think the audiobook is for me. There's just like so much going on. I don't know. I kind of want to read it on the page because that's how Olivie? I don't know how to say her name. It's like Olivia but with an E instead of an A. Olivie Blake like wrote it, so I feel like that's the best way to read it because it is kind of experimentally like written. I'm just starting it. I don't know what I think. It is so different that I like mostly, I'm like only like 20 pages in and mostly just trying to adjust. That's kind of next up. And then technically that's the 5, but I might also read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez because guess what? More people posted more videos. And I had already picked those top 5. And then I saw Poland Bananas, whose videos I watch occasionally. She posted her top 6 videos of the year, and Abby Jimenez, Part of Your World, was in that one, and I think it was in Chandler Ainsley's. It was in another video too. And so part of me wants to read that before I like totally do my wrap up. Also, I'm reading Love on the Brain because I thought this was in the list, and then I went and looked, and it's not. So I'm like 15% into Love on the Brain. And like honestly, it's delightful. So far, so good. It is the cheesiest, silliest thing I've ever read in my entire life, and I love every second of it. Like I don't think Ali Hazelwood gets mocked a lot for writing something that's like literally so ridiculous. It's like cheesy and tropey and like, come on, girly. But like that's what she's going for, I think. I don't think she's trying to write like serious literature that's like making us question our humanity. Like she's just writing a good time and she does it well. I'm a big Ali Hazelwood fan after those feminist novellas because like they were a delight. They were a little treat and I loved them. I never actually told you what Love on the Brain was about, so I'm gonna come in and do that now. Love on the Brain is part of Ali Hazelwood's like repertoire of classic Ali Hazelwood novels in which it is a woman in a STEM field and she's very, very tiny and her boyfriend is very, very large. That's just like the Ali Hazelwood trope that she enjoys, and I don't have a problem with it. I know she gets like made fun of a lot, and like should she diversify her body sizes? Like maybe. But there are bigger fish to worry about. Anyway, this story we're following, I don't remember the girl's name. The boy's name is Levi. I remember his name. She went to grad school with this man named Levi. And Levi hated her. Absolutely hated her. He like wouldn't work on projects with her, wouldn't be in the same room as her, was like kind of mean to her. Like they just had like a strange kind of hostile dynamic. And then years and years later, we move forward and she's really excited because she's gotten invited to participate in this project with NASA. She is going to be a neuroscientist who is going to come in and help NASA develop this helmet that is going to help with like neuroscience-y things. It's going to like help their brains work better, the astronauts. And look who's going to be the other co-lead who's going to run the engineering half of that project. Guess what? It's Levi. Who would have thought? And so she's moving to Houston to work on this project, and she's really nervous because Levi hates her. And so it is about this, what happens when she gets there. And this man who hates her and her have to work together. And it's just like full of miscommunication. So like miscommunication drives you nuts. Like maybe this isn't the book for you. Like it is truly like silly. It's like a silly time. She's like very clumsy. She's also like very tiny. And he's like very large. I don't know. It's like silly and tropey. And if that's going to bother you, that it's like a little bit cheesy, then like maybe it's not the book for you. I absolutely adored it. I thought it was so much fun. But that's like the premise. Is like she moves to town and has to work with her nemesis. But is he really her nemesis? Look at this cute setup. I think you're a little too tall actually. Life is hard. I wanted to give you an update. I finished Love on the Brain last night, and Love on the Brain turns out wasn't actually supposed to be in this video, but now it is. Now it is. And you know what? It was great. It was great. Was it silly? It was the silliest. It was the silliest. It was the cheesiest. It was the most ridiculous. Would any of that have happened in real life? No. I'm sorry, I wasn't reading a nonfiction book. That's okay. It was just like a delight. It was a book that was like, you know what? We need to reprioritize joy. We need to reprioritize joy in reading. Just everything you read needs to be joyful. No, but sometimes you just need a silly, goofy, joyful little book. And this book was a silly, goofy, little, joyful little book. It was silly. I love the guy. I love Levi. This is the weirdest frame shot ever. And it just sits so straight. I loved Levi. He was like so cute. That blog was like 6 months later, I think. And I was like, all that happened in 6 months? Go off. But I loved it. I loved it. I adored it. Would recommend to a friend. And then I read another book this weekend, and it is my favorite book that I've read so far this year. So good. I loved it so much. It's my first book by this author. It was a last minute addition to the list, but I read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, and I loved it. Like, my favorite book I read so far this year. One of my favorite romances I've ever read. Like, 5 stars, absolutely loved it. And I like wasn't surprised. I wasn't expecting to. It wasn't like a total surprise. It was not like I had bad expectations going in, but I don't know. It wasn't like an Emily Henry where I was like, oh, I'm going to love this book. Absolutely 100%. Like, it was a book that I was like, I would probably enjoy this, but I loved it. It's about this woman who is a doctor. And one night she winds up having this like one night stand with this guy who lives in like a really rural farm town, like 2 hours outside of the city she lives. And they like fall in love like pretty quickly. They fall in love. She's visiting him all the time on the weekends when she can, but she's not like incorporated him into his life. She like, her friends are really snooty. Her parents are like really standoffish. She's kind of in this very difficult, very extended breakup from this like emotionally abusive situation. And so she doesn't want to like bring the guy into that aspect of her life, but she's like in love with him. And I'm in love with him. He is just like super sweet and charming. He is like the mayor of this small town. It gives, if you have seen Heart of Dixie, which is one of my favorite television shows, it is like all the best parts of Heart of Dixie, but better than that. Like, it was so good. And they were both like I loved the male and I loved the girl. Like, I loved both love interests in the novel. Like, they were both fantastic. I loved the little town that we get to know. I really enjoyed the way they came to a resolution at the end of the novel. Like, it was just like perfect. Like, I couldn't have asked for anything better. It was definitely like surprising that like this last minute addition topped the list.
I wanted to like very quickly come on here and explain what happened to All Alone with You in the Ether, because I don't think I actually explained it that well in this video. So All Alone with You in the Ether by Olivie Blake is a romance novel, but it's written in this really experimental style. I am still not finished with it. So what I decided to do with All Alone with You in the Ether was, one, I wasn't really in the mood to read it, so that's the main reason it got pushed, but two, it didn't really seem like it fit in with the rest of these romance novels, so I'm gonna go ahead and bump it to my general fiction video. So my general fiction video will have 6 books in it, at least. Maybe I'll have more, like this one wound up having. Who knows? But that one is getting bumped. I'm still going to read it. It's just like not going to be for this video because I'm not done with it and this video is up. Anyway, I wanted to come to you with my final thoughts on the romance reading recommendations. I really enjoyed these. They were all like really solid romances. There were none of them that I like truly hated. Like, I had a good time with all of them, like I normally do in these videos. I really love reading other people's favorites. I think it's a great way to find favorites of your own. I wanted to go through and give you my final ranking on all of these romance books that I read and what order I would put them in. So I would say in 6th place we have Before We Were Strangers. I think this book, like I mentioned, gives me like a very Colleen Hoover feel. If you've read the Addicted series by Krista and Rebecca Richdy, I think it also has a similar feel to that. Like, it's a very specific feeling. I also feel like it feels like a little bit more of a like 2010s romance. That might, if you are not a huge romance reader, maybe that like doesn't resonate with you, but it like feels very much like a romance novel that would have come out in 2015, if that makes sense. I like don't know how to articulate it. It's like a very specific vibe, and if that's the vibe you're looking for, I think you'll love it. And then in 5th place I have The Roughest Draft. I think one of the books that I would say is most comparable to this book is The People We Meet on Vacation. I think it's structurally very similar and has that kind of like back and forth feeling of The People We Meet on Vacation. It wasn't my absolute favorite just because I mentioned I didn't feel like I got enough depth and backstory on these characters, even though I feel like they're very well fleshed out in the present. It's just something I prefer in my romances. 4, we have Heartless, which is like a very good example of like a nice, sweet, small town indie romance. It was really sweet, really cute. I loved it. It was cute, fun, light. If you're looking for a cute, fun, light weekend read, Heartless is for you. Thank you for listening by Julia Whelan. Was such a good time. I loved the audiobook. Julia Whelan is like an excellent audiobook narrator. I thoroughly enjoyed the audiobook for this one and just like overall had a better time than I was expecting and really enjoyed this. Like, when I read this book, I was like, oh, this is probably gonna be my favorite book of the video. It is shocking to me that it wound up only in 3rd place because it was really, really, really good. And then in 2nd place, Love on the Brain by Hazelwood. I just felt like this book was just like so incredibly joyful, and I think Hazelwood gets hated on like a lot for writing these books that are like very silly and very cheesy,
But I think she just like prioritizes joy, and I don't have a problem with that. I think that is lovely. I'm just like so grateful for her little books where she prioritizes joy, and this is like definitely one of them. And I, for one, had a very joyful, delightful time. And then number one of my new favorite romances, Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This book reminded me of Heart of Dixie so strongly, just with the amount of heart we get like the small town vibes. You like fall in love with this small town where the guy is from, and she's like a doctor, just like the Heart of Dixie girl. It is so good. I loved it so much. Also, I like went on and on in this video about how like dual perspective isn't for me, and then this book is in dual perspective. So I guess sometimes it does work for me. You know, I'm willing to change and learn and grow. And Abby Jimenez, this is my first Abby Jimenez books I've ever read, and I'm like eager to read some of her backlist books because I loved this book so much. But a true delight, 5-star. My favorite book I've read so far this year, although I think it may be dethroned like pretty quickly. I don't want to give spoilers for future videos, but I've already started reading for my fantasy video, and wow, there's some goodies in it. That's all I'm gonna say. Subscribe if you want to see those videos or some of the other videos I have planned over the next couple months. Things should be more back on track because I'm planning ahead more. We're gonna figure this out, you and me, this schedule. We're gonna make it work. It's just taking me some time to acclimate. I started this channel and then got a book deal like 2 weeks later. So like, it was a startling transition. Subscribe if you want to comment your favorite romances from last year. If there were any romances that I didn't mention in this video that you absolutely loved, that you read last year, like please tell me. I like devour romance books. I've read like 3 or 4 other romance books since finishing the ones for this video. And I finished these like a week ago. And I will talk to you next time. Bye.